Hey, what's up you guys, and welcome back to my channel where every week I'll be doing a review of the new HBO show Euphoria starring Zendaya. So episode 5, let's get into it ladies, let's get into it. Can I just say this is the earliest that I am releasing my reviews. Let me just get a round of applause for myself, you know, because bitches is lazy as fuck out here. So yeah, let's get into episode 5. So we finally learn a little bit more about Maddie. We get her whole backstory. So basically Maddie grew up as like a pageant girl, and because of that she was very used to being the center of attention. People loved her and she became very confident while doing that. Her mom was like an esthetician, so she did nails for like wealthy women, and Maddie basically aspired from a young age to be like one of those wealthy women that would just sit pretty and get their nails done at the nail salon. So I think that's why her and Nate's relationship works, because she manipulates him and in turn he pampers her, and she is able to kind of do that whole like sitting pretty thing that she wants to do. The only reason why she stopped doing pageants was because there was like a case of like a guy molesting a child, and her mom was like, no mas, no more, you're not doing that anymore. But that didn't stop her from continuing to be this like confident young girl, and she grew up into the Maddie that we know now. Because she's so likable and people are always rooting for her, she's very good at manipulating people, particularly Nate. You know how like we talked about like how Nate picked Maddie because she like fits into this like cookie cutter mold or whatever, and like she's easy to control. That's actually like what he thinks is going on in the situation, but that is not what is happening in her mind. So she knows exactly the type of guy that Nate is. She knows just what to say in order to get him to do what she wants, including the fact that she lied to him about being a virgin. She like basically plays this like innocent role in order to make him feel like a man, and in order to basically stroke his ego and get what she wants. You see her basically like manipulating him, being like, oh, like you're so big and strong or whatever, I'm just Maddie, you know, and then he'll like get her like these fancy gifts and stuff because it just makes him feel manly, and she is so good at manipulating him to get what she wants. I admire Maddie for that so much. I'm honestly so glad that we finally got her backstory, because after 4 episodes I was beginning to be like, Maddie's a little bit like bland. Like I feel like I said this in one of my other reviews, I felt like there just wasn't much happening there with her character. So I'm glad we got this backstory on her. It's very interesting. So basically this whole episode revolves around Maddie, and as we know, last week Nate like put his hand around her neck and gave her those really bad bruises. One of the final scenes we saw of Maddie was of her looking in the mirror and crying because her neck was really badly bruised up. So we basically follow her after that. So she goes to school and she like puts on like a bunch of makeup on her neck, and she's like wearing a hoodie, trying to not call attention to herself, but probably bringing more attention to herself with the hoodie and stuff in order to hide what Nate did. And then she ends up crashing basically like in class because the emotional turmoil that she's going through, as well as the drug that she took this past weekend, just was like a lot for her to handle. So she like passes out in class, and because of that people see the bruising on her neck, and the police are called despite Maddie's protest. This is very typical of abuse victims, to really want to protect the person that is abusing them, because they still think that even though they're capable of hurting them, that there's a part of them that still loves them. They also are very afraid of getting hurt again. So those tendencies are being displayed like very clearly in Maddie. Like I mentioned in the last video, I don't think this was the first time that Nate has ever hurt her. The police get called, Nate's parents get called. Nate's dad is like shook because he thinks that it has to do with him sleeping with underage girls. So he literally like goes into the bathroom and like throws up of like nervousness, but like thank God for him, I guess, but not really. It's about his psychopath son, Nate. So of course he like tells Nate to basically just like play it cool. He believes him, obviously, because they're both psychos, and Nate basically denies everything. And while he's denying that to the school, Maddie is also on her end denying everything, but like she's very clearly like distressed. She's not wearing makeup, so like you can see like the bags under her eyes. She clearly hasn't had a lot of rest and has been through a lot this past weekend. Even though she's like denying everything, like it's very clear that she's just trying to protect Nate. So from the school, they all go to the police station. Nate gets questioned again. So does Maddie. They like take pictures of her bruises and stuff on Nate's end. He basically like throws her under the bus, which is so terrible considering the fact that she's protecting him from potentially going to jail. And he basically is just like, well, you know, like, I didn't do anything or whatever, but to be honest, Maddie was on drugs this past weekend, and I think maybe that's the reason why she's like being crazy. So he's just a piece of shit. Like, literally, Nate. Like, I hate him. He's terrible. He has no redeeming qualities. I seriously want to know at least one redeeming quality that this kid has, because he does not have any. Wait, let me make sure I'm still recording. Oh. And I'm Maddie and Nate's storyline ends with Maddie's mom deciding that she does want to press charges despite Maddie's protests, and we kind of don't really know what's gonna happen with them. So I hope that motherfucker goes to jail. There's so many things wrong with him, like so many things, and he just needs to go to jail, period. At the end of the episode though, despite everything that's been going on, Nate texts Maddie through like a weird like thing, like not his phone number, after like ignoring her for the longest. Finally he's like, meet me at this place, and she goes and they have this like little reunion, and it's honestly so heartbreaking because she loves him, you know. He is a sociopath. He doesn't have empathy for other people, and like that is so clear in just like that final shot of his face that we get, where he's just kind of like looking off into the distance while he's like holding her and like comforting her. So messed up, because he's comforting her because of what he did, you know what I mean? And it's just, I want better for Maddie. I really do. I really want better for Maddie. Moving on to Rue. Rue is like fiending for some drugs again. She really wants to do fentanyl in particular because she says that that's like the best thing that she's ever done, and there's no feeling that ever compares to that, but she's staying clean for the sake of Jules. And she actually compares Jules to the feeling of being on fentanyl. So this episode is like very interesting to me because it's taking two relationships that seem so different like at surface level and like comparing them hands-on. So it's very clear to see that Jules and Rue have a very codependent relationship that isn't the healthiest, but so do Nate and Maddie. And the reason why I think this is because Nate and Maddie both use each other for their own personal gain, whether it be like for sex, for validation, for gifts, you know, and they can't seem to pull away from each other for that reason, while Jules and Rue are using each other more for emotional support, and that's where like the codependency kind of comes in. Rue compared fentanyl to Jules. She's basically using Jules as a replacement for drugs, while Jules on the other hand is also going through all the stuff with Nate, which by the way she didn't even tell Rue about, and Rue didn't even bother asking, which is another reason why I think that their relationship isn't the healthiest, because while they get along very well and they're close friends and they obviously support each other emotionally, it doesn't seem like Rue has much interest in doing the same for Jules. Jules is also going through a lot, and she's using Rue as a way to distract herself. So they're becoming very, very codependent, just like Nate and Maddie. Thought that was really interesting that they were like basically comparing these two relationships, especially the Rue and Jules relationship, where like I personally, and I know a lot of other people, were rooting for them as a couple, but like after this episode it kind of shows you that that might not be the best thing. Jules is not into Rue in that way, and in fact every time somebody kind of brings them up in that way together, she kind of is like uncomfortable with it. But Rue on the other hand basically talks about them like they're together. I think she just straight up thinks that they're together, but that they're just like taking things slow, which isn't what it is at all. So it seems like there's a lot of miscommunication in the Rue and Jules relationship, and I currently, as much as it breaks my heart, do not think that they're a good fit for each other, at least not at this very moment when they're both going through so much, even though they really just went and got matching tattoos. And I was like, ah! And I feel like it's gonna end up with Jules just like pushing Rue away, and that might lead to Rue having a relapse. We learn a little bit more about Rue in this episode. Actually, we learn a little bit about her sexual history, and the only thing I could think during this was just like, girl, you're gay. And she has like this one encounter with Lexi where like Lexi likes a guy and Rue's like, I'm gonna help teach you how to kiss him, and they like kiss or whatever, and it's like, girl, you're gay. Like, that's the only thing I could say about that. Like, girl, you are gay. So on to Kat. Kat doesn't really have much showtime in this episode, but we do see her being reckless, as she tends to be. So she ends up hooking up with this guy that like worked in the store that we saw her in a few episodes ago, where she like had a fantasy that they were hooking up, but they never actually did it. And she ends up hooking up with him in this episode, and it's like so weird because like you could tell that like he's clearly like actually digging her like as a person, but she kind of just wants to like hook up, and it's like a little weird. And when they do hook up, oh my god, I was like, oh my god, wait, my eye is so itchy right now. Oh. And when they do hook up, it's like so like cringy. Like he basically is like, that was the best I've ever had, and she's just like, I know. And then she just walks away with her bad bitch energy. Like, I'm here for Kat experimenting. I really, really am. But like I said in my last video, she needs to use protection. Like, she needs to be responsible. You cannot be out here hoeing without being responsible. That's just not how it works. Girl, she better not catch something. That's all I know. So at the very end of the episode, we see Nate's dad, who I think his name is Caleb or Cal or something like that, in his gross seedy motel again, where he's meeting this very flamboyant gay, and this guy like is like the definition of like hyper feminine gay, who kind of just wants to like hook up and like get it over with. I feel like that was kind of like feeding into like a stereotype a little bit of like gay men being like hypersexual or whatever, but I don't really want to get into that right now. Cal just wants to talk, and he basically like opens up to this guy and is just like, I feel like I'm hiding a part of my identity, so clearly the fact that he likes men. And Cal is like very worried that it might affect his children. He talks about how his children have like all this anger built up in them, and he wants to know if like, even if they don't know what's going on with him, like, does this still have an effect on them subconsciously? Because little does he know, Nate does know, and that is a part of his anger or whatever. So that was kind of a sad moment. Clearly he knows that Nate actually did put his hand around Maddie's neck, if he's saying that, you know what I mean? He's just going to stand by Nate because that's his son, but he knows deep down that he did do it, and he feels guilty and he feels partly responsible. So, wow, what a hot mess. Like, that was really sad, honestly, especially because he had to resort to talking to someone that didn't seem like they cared at all about this. And I really think that he should be going to therapy, and he needs to come clean to his family about his identity, because it is affecting his children, you know, in way more ways than he knows. So that is basically the end of episode 5. So yeah, what were your thoughts on this week's episode? What do you think is going to happen with Nate? Do you think he's going to go to jail? I hope he goes to jail. I really hope that Maddie like gets some sense into her and stops defending him, but I don't think that's going to happen, to be honest, because that's just very not typical of abuse victims. Like, it typically takes like a lot for them to fully turn against the person, especially if they think that they're in love. Leave a comment down below. And yeah, I think there's only like 2 more episodes to this, so this series is quickly wrapping up, which is kind of sad because it was helping me stay consistent. But fret not, I will keep making videos, and maybe I'll review another show. I love TV, I love movies, I love music, so I might start doing other like reviews and stuff. I was thinking of maybe doing a review for the new Jaden Smith album. If you guys are interested in seeing that, just let me know in the comments. So yeah, thanks so much for watching. Bye!